is a short video explaining Greek verbs. In English, when we use a verb like hunting, in order to communicate who is doing the hunting, when the hunting is happening, we require helping words. So for instance, this sentence here, I am hunting. If I was to say, you are hunting, or they are hunting, the verb hunting remains the same, and we need extra words in order for us to know who is doing the hunting. This is not the case with Greek. In Greek, we keep the root of our word, like luo, the root of luo is lu, and then we add or change the ending and also sometimes the beginning of the verb in order to communicate who is speaking when the verb is taking place. This is similar to what we saw in nouns, where we talked about nouns like logos, having building blocks. We can change the ending of our word to logu, new ending, and all of a sudden we've gone from saying a word, and this one here means of a word. Verbs in both English and Greek have what we call person, number, voice, tense, and mood, and I'll go through each of these just very briefly. Person. Person refers to the subject of the verbal idea, the subject of the verbal idea. And we could have first person, and that would be I or we. You can have second person, which would be you or you all, or use if you were using a more informal version of English. And third person, he, she, it, or they. First person, the subject is speaking. I am hearing. We are hearing. In second person, the subject is being spoken to. You are hearing. In third person, the subject is being spoken about. He, she, it, or they are hearing. So first person, subject is speaking. I am hearing. Second person, subject is being spoken to. You are hearing. Third person, the subject is being spoken about. He, she, or it or they are hearing. We can obviously also have number, and we saw that just in the previous slide. The single version would be I, you, he, she, it. The plural versions would be we, you all, they. And this is just simply saying, is it you, one single person who's doing the hearing or the speaking, or are there many people who are doing the hearing or the speaking? Verbs also have voice, and voice indicates how the subject relates to the action that is being expressed. So you could have an active voice. Active voice. The subject is the one that's performing the action. I see the tree. I am walking. I'll jump over to passive just for a second before I go to middle. Passive would be just as it sounds. The subject receives the action. The subject is no longer doing the action, but action is happening to them. I am being hit. We are being loved. So in the passive, the subject receives the action, and in the active, the subject is the one that's actually doing the action. There is this third voice called the middle, and this is where the subject both performs the action and is affected by the action. So there's something sort of internal about the middle. You're working your way into your own self. And so for the middle, we would say something like, I see myself. I'm doing the seeing, but the seeing of what I'm seeing is myself. I see myself. Or you could say, I see for myself. It's almost like the voice of autonomy, the voice of autonomy. There is also tense. In English, we basically have these three tenses: present, I am hearing currently, that's something I'm doing right now; past tense, I heard, it's finished, it's done; and future, I will hear. There are slightly different tenses in Greek, and we will speak about these in more detail next week. Mood. The last element of a verb is what we call mood, and this indicates the author's understanding of the verbal action's relationship to reality. That's just a fancy way of saying, is this verb being used as a factual statement, a possible statement, a desired statement, or a command or instruction? And in Greek, we have terms for each of these. There's the indicative mood. This is the one where it's a statement. The subjunctive mood, which is the mood of possibility. I may do that. I may go. It's not a statement of something that I am doing. It's something that I might do or possibly do. There's the optative, which is the mood of desire. I wish to go. I wish to go. And then the last one is the imperative. You can think of this as almost like a command. Go, go. We see a lot of imperatives, particularly in the letters, like Paul's letters and Peter's letters, and other parts like that of the New Testament, where there are instructions from the person writing. So the indicative mood in Greek represents something as certain or asserted. He went fishing. He will go fishing. It's a fact. I am fishing. I might not be fishing, but I'm saying it as though it is certain. It's a statement. The subjunctive represents something as probable, contingent, or indefinite. He might go fishing, or whenever he goes fishing, he does X, Y, Z. And the optative mood represents something as possible or hoped for. I wish he would go fishing. I hope to go fishing. And the final one is this imperative, which represents something as a request or a command. Go fishing, that's the command, or please go fishing would be the request. So verbs can use indicative mood, subjunctive mood, optative mood, or imperative mood in Greek. We are going to be concentrating for the first part of this course just on the indicative mood, which are statements. So we're not going to be looking at these other ones just yet. So, as I said before, you can have a verb like luo. Luo, I loose, I release, or I untie. This here is the form that you would find in your lexicon, which is a fancy word for dictionary, Greek dictionary. It's also the form that you will find in your vocabulary list. Now, the verbal root, so the part of the verb that sort of sits as the very basic element of this verb, and then other things are added to it, is lu, lambda, upsilon. You would never see lu written anywhere, but it's the most basic part of this verb to which other things are then added and put on. And when those things are added or put on, that is when the verb changes its mood, voice, person, number, etc. So here's an example. I might just, just change that for a second. Oops. So here is an example up the top. I've got the word luo. luo. Luo is the form that we find, as I said, in our lexicon. But this form is technically known as the present tense. The present tense. And if we're to be even more specific, it's actually the first person singular form. Active singular form of luo. Luo. And so technically speaking, this omega has been added onto the stem. If we were to insert a little sigma in between the upsilon and the omega, all of a sudden, this word has become I will loose. I will loose. And so as you can see there, just a small addition in Greek, like the addition of this little sigma, changes the tense of this word. And all of a sudden, we have I will loose. In English, we would need to add the word will in order for us to know that it's happening in the future. The verb in both of these, loose, does not change. Or Greek has something called the aorist tense, and if you were to add an epsilon at the start, a sigma and an alpha, these are our building blocks, all of a sudden we've got I loosed. And so that's something that happened in the past, and it's a completed action in the past. You don't need to remember all of these forms just now, but the point of bringing this up is to simply say that unlike English, we don't use additional words to explain how a verb is being used, but we add these extra elements or building blocks or components onto the verb in order for it to tell us whether or not the tense has changed, or the person has changed, or the voice has. This is the very first paradigm that you need to learn in Greek. Paradigm is a fancy word for pattern. Just like we saw in nouns, we had declensions, which were patterns of nouns. With verbs, we have paradigms. And this here is our first paradigm, our first pattern that we need to learn. The word here is akuo, which means I hear. And if I wanted to say you hear, I don't need to add an extra word. Instead, I need to change the ending of aku. So it becomes aku ace. Or if I wanted to say he hears, it would become aku a. Or we hear, aku omen. You hear in the plural, so yous here, aku ete. And the final one is they hear, aku usen. So the first one here is first person singular. I hear, there's only one of me that's doing the hearing. I am the subject. Second person, there's only one person, singular, second person singular. You hear, the subject is being spoken to. Third person, akue, he, she, or it hears. The subject is being spoken about. And then you can have your plural forms. First person plural, we hear. Second person plural, yous hear. Third person plural, they hear. And the way we do that is we see our verb change its form. And that, the fancy word for that is the word is inflected. The ending changes. So we've got akuo, akuase, akue, akuamen, akuete, and akuusen. And so if you took the time to memorize these endings here, o, ace, a, omen, ete, usen, then you could apply these endings to any verb that you learn. So for instance, we've got the verb luo. It would decline in exactly the same way. Lu ace, lu a, lu omen, lu ete, lu loosen. I loose, you loose, he, she, or it looses, we loose, y'all loose, they loose. O, ace, a, omen, ete, usen. These endings would be really, really important to memorize these endings. O, ace, a, omen, ete, usen. And these are what we call our primary active endings. When you see these endings, you know that we are using the active voice, right? We're using the active voice, and they are only ever used for the present or the future tense. I am loosing or I will loose. So these are our primary active endings. Just as we saw for Greek nouns, in Greek we need to be able to parse our verbs. And remember, parsing was essentially when we're pulling apart a word and trying to work out where is the root and what has been added on. What has been added on, and how does that then change who's speaking, when they're speaking, how many people are speaking, and so forth. So we look for, first of all, we look for the lexical form of a word. Then we try and work out what set of endings is on, and then we can answer this question: the person, number, tense, voice, and mood. Here is an example. We have legusen, legusen. The first thing I want to do when I see a verb is try and work out what the lexical form is. What is the lexical form of this verb? The lexical form is lego, lego, and it means I say or I speak. Now, the root of this word is leg. Again, we would never see leg written down anywhere, but it's the most basic part of this word, and that's what means say or speak. Now that we know that, we can see what has been added onto this word. This here has been what has been added onto the word usen, usen. We call this a morpheme. It's the building block which is added onto the beginning or end of a word. And it's actually this part here that's telling us the person, number, tense, mood, and voice of the verb. Lego gives us the meaning of the word, say or speak. That doesn't change. It's this building block at the end where the rest of the information is. So if I was parsing the word legusen, I would need to think about the paradigm I just learned. O, ace, a, omen, ete, usen. O, ace, a, omen, ete, usen. Oh, that's the building block. Usen. That's the building block. So it must be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, singular, plural. It must be third person plural. They say or they speak. So if I'm parsing this word, I could say that legusen comes from lego, meaning say or speak, that this usen on the end is telling me that it's third person plural, they, and that it's present tense and active voice, because remember, these are our primary endings. Primary endings. These are always used for the active voice, and they can only be present or future, but we're not doing future today, so we know they have to be present. Have to be present. So the ending pattern is what's telling me that this is active present. Then when I go through and go, okay, well, that's I say, you say, he says, we say, you say, they say, that's what's telling me that it's third person plural. And then I offer a translation for legusen, they say, or they are saying. Sometimes in Greek, you'll see what's called a parsing chart, which looks like this, and it will be laid out with person, number, tense, voice, mood, lexical form, and inflected meaning. I always like to start here because then I know with my verb what has been added, what are we working with, what are the components that I need to try and decipher in order to answer the rest of this question. I'm going to stop the video there and I will make a separate video where we do some translation together.